Stretching 2,600 miles across Europe and the Mideast is a mystical line of historic monasteries. Remarkably, the history of each is directly connected to a supernatural being revered from antiquity, Saint Michael the Archangel. Although built over a period of 1,400 years by diverse communities of monks and friars, each monastery attracts thousands of curious visitors and devout pilgrims every year. Visitors marvel how such large and beautiful structures could ever be built without the assistance of modern machinery and materials. But it wasn't until the 20th century that archaeologists, with the aid of modern mapping and global positioning technologies, discovered that the location of these 7 monasteries, when plotted on a Mercator map used by mariners, were in a perfectly straight line, as if their locations were planned by aliens or the gods for some grand purpose. Thus, after 1,500 years of hiding in plain sight, the sword of St. Michael was discovered. The question is, why have these particular monasteries intrigued archaeologists, and why are they in a straight line? The St. Michael alignment of monasteries is intriguing for a number of reasons. First, the monasteries are in an amazingly straight line, in spite of their odd locations. Second, each site is dedicated to or closely associated with apparitions of St. Michael the Archangel, who appeared with salvific assistance in times of great need to the surrounding villages. Third, each site was the former location of a pagan shrine or demonic forces that were defeated by St. Michael. Fourth, although constructed by diverse populations of monks and friars, each monastery was built in inaccessible places, a feat some call miraculous. And fifth, and perhaps most intriguingly, the St. Michael line is aligned with the Northern Hemisphere's summer solstice sunset, the longest day of the year.
The right pronunciation for the Skelligs in my language is Skellig Vihil, Skellig Michael.
Is that the Irish pronunciation?
Irish phrase, yeah.
You just told me about the line of St. Michael. How do you know about that?
I've always known about it.
You've always known about
Yeah.
it? Why is it in a straight line? Do you
I
know?
don't know.
Isn't it interesting? Do you think it's...
How did they line them up?
Yeah. Do you think St. Michael did it?
They're directly in line, but how would they know? How? Back in the 4th and 5th century?
Yeah.
How did they know about it?
No,
was
they
there,
didn't.
Was there special stars up in the sky that are gone now?
I don't know. What do you think?
How did they do it? What was in line that then? It is very interesting. Because the one in France is amazing. It's built on a little island. How in the hell did they build this? They lugged those stones from all over the island?
Pretty amazing.
Wow.
The monastery at Skellig Michael, for instance, is right out there in the west, in the middle of the Irish Sea, and it was done. And they're living there for 500 years in around the year 600. I mean, this is just phenomenal. Why did they build it there? What did it mean?
The community of monks and friars that built the monasteries, for the most part, knew nothing of the others, which were built centuries before or after. Questions come to mind. Was there some ancient technology or secret geographical awareness that allowed the builders to align their monastery with the others? There are some possible explanations, but do any of them make sense? As John Cav Sheehan wonders, could the St. Michael sword alignment be due to an alignment of the stars that are no longer in the sky? Or is there some unseen geological, mystical, or magnetic resonance that dowsing or divining could detect? Could the builders have lined up the construction with the sunset on the evening of the summer solstice? Is it possible that there are energy fields emanating from the earth that the builders were able to detect, aiding the alignment? Was there some secret alignment knowledge passed down from ancient times that the builders tapped into? It is true that a few of the monasteries were built as way stations for pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. But all of them? And was there a way to forge a plan that created a straight line across continental divides and major bodies of water? Perhaps the most obvious question to ask is what role St. Michael, or any other supernatural being for that matter, had in the construction and alignment of the edifices. Of course, that's begging the question, isn't it? Since there are plenty of skeptics who doubt the very existence of angels.
I think skeptics doubt the existence of angels because they doubt the entire supernatural realm. We live in a very materialistic society, and by materialistic I don't mean just going out to shop until you drop. That's greed, which is a symptom of materialism. Materialism instead is a philosophy which assumes, without even arguing the point, that the only reality is the physical reality. Now, this has been hammered into us through our science lessons and through basically a materialistic worldview. So therefore, by definition, most people are skeptical of the supernatural, angels, ghosts, and so forth. And yet what I find strange is that at the same time, there's a great popular fascination with things like exorcism and seances and ghost stories and aliens and UFOs and Bigfoot, you name it. There's a great interest in the paranormal, so it reveals to me that actually while most people would say they don't believe in the supernatural, they actually deep down have a real belief in it.
After months of reading and asking such questions, I set off on a pilgrimage to the 7 monasteries. Not only did I want to discover more about each, the communities that built them and their purpose, but I was determined to see if I could discover any evidence for why, today, centuries later, the straight line matters at all. Often, when I fly out of Detroit, Michigan's McNamara Terminal, I will visit this 700-foot-long tunnel that connects the main concourse to the smaller one. The tunnel features moving walkways and etched-glass panels illuminated by colorful LED lighting set to music that can only be described as mystical. For me, a visit to it soothes the anxiety of air travel, which was no doubt its intended purpose. But on this occasion, it reminded me of something else. Here, underground, was something heavenly that transcended the tons of concrete, steel, and screeching jet engines on the taxiways above. I was departing on a 15,000-mile journey in search of the supernatural. After a transatlantic flight, my first stop was Dublin, Ireland. There, I caught a high-speed rail headed south to Killarney. Well, here I am in downtown Killarney. My suitcase I left on the train. Now the taxi cab driver is going to pick me up here in front of this Murphy's pub in about an hour, and we're going to try to retrieve the suitcase when it gets back in town, which it will be in an hour, they said. And that, we discovered that the suitcase was missing just after the taxi driver says, "So, has your trip been uneventful so far?" I said, "Yes." Then I looked in the car and I said, "Where's my suitcase?" And of course, by that time, the train had left. So, there we go. But this is Killarney. A little bit of transcendence, huh? While I waited, my driver, Sean, suggested I pay a visit to this Franciscan friary. Strapped to the fence was this promotional banner reminding us to pray a novena to St. Anthony, who is the patron saint of all things lost. While I prayed to find my lost suitcase, Sean helped a lost soul find his way. Losing my suitcase so soon into my trek gave me grave doubts about the trip I was just beginning. On the way south, the final 77 kilometers to Port McGee and Sean's car, I told him about this and about the trip to investigate St. Michael's sword. He seemed unusually interested.
This is Sean Michael, what's your last name?
Swords.
I spell it.
S-W-O-R-D-S.
S-W.
O-R-D-S.
That says swords.
Yep.
Sean
Michael Swords.
Michael Sword.
Swords.
This
yeah.
is my taxi driver, my driver. Michael.
I from a parish in Tipperary town, and our parish church is St. Michael's Church.
Oh my goodness.
I would have been christened, communion, confirmation. My kids would have all attended St. Michael's Church. So, yep, we're certainly in the realm here of something a little bit different, I think.
This is a moment of transcendence, Michael.
Well, I'm starting to get the arms on my hairs on my arms are starting to stand up here. Now I know we got the AC on, but certainly I am moved. I'm certainly moved by what you've told me so far, Stan.
Wow, this is really incredible.
Unfortunately, at that moment, I hit the pause on my camera, but we kept talking. Michael went on to say that when he agreed to take the job of driving me to Port McGee, he knew nothing about me or my project. But once I told him about the project of exploring St. Michael's sword and my doubts as I was suffering a bit from jet lag and then losing my luggage, although only temporarily, he said, "Stan, I don't have any doubts that you should be doing this." Sean Michael Swords being assigned as my driver was more than a transcendent moment. It was as if St. Michael himself had dropped out of the heavens with his taxi license and was escorting me to my destiny. Port McGee was where I was to disembark on a small tour boat to the island of Skellig Michael and the northernmost monastery of St. Michael's Sword. The boats don't go there every day due to the unpredictable weather and the treacherous landing on the island. Consequently, I had made reservations for 2 successive days, and it was good that I did. My first day in Port McGee, the winds were too strong and the seas too rough to land on the island. But it was otherwise a beautiful day. So I hired a driver to visit another important site along the St. Michael line, just a few kilometers to the east. The followers of St. Fionan had established their hermitage on Skellig Michael in the 5th century, but by the 12th century the combination of more severe winter weather patterns and raids by Vikings forced the monks to relocate to a protected bay on the Irish mainland. Today, the place the Fionan monks established on Ireland's coast is known as Skellig. Here they adopted the Augustinian rule, dedicated their church once again to St. Michael, and for several hundred years lived, labored, prayed, and died here. The next day, the winds moderated, and the Port McGee tour boats disembarked for Skellig Michael, the small rocky island 8 miles southwest of Ireland in the foreboding North Atlantic. The Skellig Islands are natural habitats for colonies of gannets, puffins, and razorbills, and a few dozen gray seals. The birds all leave before fall. It's hard to imagine a more difficult place for human beings to live in winter. Legend has it that Skellig Michael received its name in the 5th century at the hands of St. Patrick.
Yes, actually it is. There is a legend that in the 5th century, St. Patrick, patron saint of Ireland, was fighting against all these demons that just encrusted Ireland. And he prayed And in the answer, God exiled them all to the Skellig. But it was at that time attached to the mainland. Yes. But St. Patrick cut it off just for safety. So now it is around 12 kilometers away. But all these evils, these creepy, crawly creatures that were actually demons, like toads, dragons, snakes, were still there. So the island was still under the threat of these demons. So St. Patrick prayed again, and in the answer there was St. Michael descending to the island with his army, and they cast all of these demons into the sea. And from this moment on, we do not have any poisonous, creepy, crawly creatures here.
St. Patrick's transcendence experience with St. Michael and the exorcism of demons and pagan ideology from the Irish Isles was the reason this rocky island came to be known as Skellig Michael. And within a few years, St. Fionnan sailed to its rocky shores with a dozen other hardy men and established a monastic community. The men that came with Fionnan in 549 AD and those that followed spent the first several hundred years cutting stairways out of the compressed slate and old red sandstone, allowing access to an elevation above the ocean swells and destructive waves of the wild North Atlantic. There, 550 to 600 feet above the sea, monks tediously built retaining walls for gardens and beehive-shaped cells with dry-fitted stone in which to live, eat, and worship. Today there remains what archaeologists believe are 2 oratories or prayer cells, a cemetery, crosses, and 6 domed beehive cells. The church was built later with imported sandstone and lime mortar that has since collapsed except for the altar and east wall and window. At one time, perhaps 10 to 15 monks lived on the island, subsisting on fish, bird meat, and eggs, grown vegetables, rainwater, and occasional supplies from the mainland. But mainland supplies only came during the summer months and only on fair weather days, which were not frequent. Today, the island approaches have been somewhat tamed to allow fair-weathered visitors, young and old, to scale the stairways to the top in an attempt to imagine the austere life these monks kept.
Why did those monks go across the Irish Sea, which today is a 45-minute crossing in a powerboat, and it's very bumpy and it's very tumultuous? They were crossing in probably little leather coracles, leather-bound coracles, rowing their way across there to get to this rocky island in the middle of the sea. Why did they do that? And why did they live there for 500 years on the few little scrawny vegetables they could grow in their terraced gardens, supplemented by some fish they could catch and some birds' eggs? What were they thinking? Well, I can tell you what they were thinking. They really did believe that at those particular places, they were in touch with the angels. And they were in touch with the angels because by their asceticism and their austere lives and their lives of prayer, they were rising above this world to get to that world. And they did that and they pursued that life because they really believed that through their prayers, through their liturgy, through their asceticism, they were making contact with the angels, with the spiritual beings, and those spiritual beings were therefore aiding them in their prayers for this world. There was a connecting place, if you like.
But I study astronomy as a scientific topic, and I'm quite sure of the celestial alignments of some sacred building and structure during the centuries. It is possible to know this kind of tradition since the prehistory. Even the megaliths are oriented toward the sky in order to connect man and sky. So this is not strange that also with the St. Michael cult it was some connection between the sky and the earth. If you want also to have a sense of the supernatural, you have to make a special place for build your religious building. And the sky, the connection between the sky and the earth is very powerful in some places. So I believe in this alignment personally, even if I'm not specialist of this kind of churches. And in general, I believe that every powerful cult in the human history have a connection within the special places that are not only places on earth, but are connected with the sky.
The nights on Skellig Michael were certainly dark and heavenly orbs bright, as it was everywhere before the age of electricity. Could the apparent movement of the sun, moon, planets, and stars have informed the monastery founders where to build by projecting their heavenly positions onto the earth? How might that work? The Orion constellation theory suggests that the positions of the three great pyramids at the Giza complex outside of Cairo, Egypt, are aligned in a pattern similar with the stars in Orion's belt. Such a theoretical connection is made because the constellation Orion was related to ancient Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife. Was there such a pattern in the stars that could explain the alignment and spacing of the St. Michael monasteries? To do that, there would need to be several or even 7 prominent stars in the fixed heavenly background that closely mimic the pattern and placement of the monasteries. These reference stars, however, could not be planets that move throughout the starry heavens on a night-to-night basis. Yet no straight-line constellation is known to have ever existed, nor is there a historical record of a single monastery correlating with a single star. Alternately, could the apparent movement of the stars overhead, or any particular star, inscribe the St. Michael alignment across the Earth's surface? That is, do the apparent star tracks above us parallel the St. Michael line below? No, they do not, for a very simple reason. The apparent star tracks are parallel with the Earth's equator, which is at 90 degrees with the axes of the Earth around which the Earth turns, making the stars apparently streak above us. But the sword of St. Michael alignment is inclined 30 degrees to the equator and the star tracks in the sky. Finally, could it be that periodic astrological events such as the appearance of a supernova or the transit of an asteroid or comet have anything to do with a monastery location? Yes, any of those might correlate, except for one thing. There is no record, legend, or even rumor that any of the locations for a monastery were built because of any such astrological connection. While these astrological theories do not seem to explain the St. Michael Sword Monastery alignment, there still may be a correlation with heavenly objects, such as the sun. 250 miles southeast of Skellig Michael, off Cornwall, England's southern coast, and the town of Marazion, is the tidal island, castle, and chapel of St. Michael's Mount, the second of the St. Michael monasteries. But getting there was a problem. From Portmagee, a taxi and a train returned me to Dublin, where I caught a short-haul flight across St. George's Channel to Bristol, England. There, I rented a car and began my 3-hour drive to Marazion. Here's an example of bad transcendence, at least that's what I think is going on. 10 minutes after I rented a car at the Bristol, UK airport to drive down to Marazion, where I was supposed to stay for a couple of days with Father Dwight, and by the way, Father Dwight got sick and went back to America, which means that I've got to learn to drive now on the wrong side of the street. I hit a pothole, and the front left tire went flat. Well, here in Britain, the solution isn't just to change the tire. Why? Because rental cars in Britain don't have spare tires. The solution is to wait by the side of the road for 3 or 4 hours until it gets dark at least, and for a wrecker to come, and then they tow you back to the airport to get another car, except that, of course, Hertz is closed by midnight, and so I'll have to wait till morning. So I had to get another hotel room to stay at, and we'll see if we can start it all again tomorrow. But anyhow, I think that's an example of bad transcendence. Is that the wrecker? No, that was some sort of farming equipment in the middle of the city. Well, welcome to Britain. Transcendence, good or bad. Once I recovered from the flat tire in Bristol, I tried once again to drive on the left side of the English roads. The narrow roads I took south of Marazion were amazing, if not difficult, for a stranger to navigate. One lane, tall shrubs, and no warning of approaching vehicles around a corner. Travel has challenges, like reserving a pair of B&B rooms for 2 people for 2 nights, but arriving a day late with only 1 person. And yet there, out my B&B window, was what I had come for, St. Michael's Mount. The next morning the sun was shining and the tide was high. St. Michael's Mount rose from the English Channel like a castle only found in fairy tales. Archaeologists believe the island was the location of a Christian monastery as early as the 5th century. By the time of the Norman conquest in 1066, the island, monastery, and chapel had come into the possession of the Benedictine Abbey of Mount St. Michel. What attracted people from all over the region to St. Michael's Mount here in England were the stories of miraculous intercessions and healings brought about by St. Michael the Archangel. From ancient times, there had been stories of fishermen and seafarers being lured onto the rocks by sirens, but guided to safety by St. Michael, who appeared glowing on the island where today a pillar of stone stands. Once in the hands of the Benedictine monks, pilgrims in need would come to what was now considered a sacred place of devotion. While the healing of pilgrims were assumed to be numerous, history has handed down to us only one recorded account of 4 healings in the year 1262. It is the account of a first-hand witness to the miraculous healings with dates and names of the healed individuals. A woman named Matilda, who had lost the power to speak, a young blind girl named Alice, Christina, who was blind for 6 years, and a certain dumb man. They were all miraculously healed during or just after their pilgrimage to the island by the prayers of the blessed Archangel Michael. Thus, because of these physical miracles witnessed by many and attested by the monastery friars, St. Michael's Mount became renowned as a place to connect with the supernatural, a place where physical reality became one with transcendent reality. Today, the island is operated by the British National Trust as thousands come each day to admire and wander about the island, gardens, and the castle, is that they too were hoping to catch a glimpse of St. Michael and reconnect with the supernatural. The very visible but also very inaccessible locations of all the St. Michael Sword monasteries suggests a mystical, even magnetic attraction of spiritually minded people. But can this mystical, earthly, even magnetic resonance with the earth be the reason the monastery sites were constructed in a straight line? Are there lines of magnetic force emanating from the earth that could guide builders in such an alignment? It is true that the earth acts like a giant dipole magnet, and that lines of magnetism do encompass the earth and pierce its crust. Mariners use these lines of magnetic tension to guide their journeys, and surveyors use them to plot the construction of buildings. Yet for a surveyor or navigator to use those magnetic lines of tension to plot a path or determine a location requires two inventions, a compass and a map. The history of the magnetic compass dates back 2,000 years to the Han Dynasty in China. But practically speaking, the availability of a magnetized needle wasn't in use for navigation until the 10th or 11th century. Map development reaches back to the 3rd century BC, where Eratosthenes came up with the idea of lines of longitude and latitude. Over the centuries, maps developed along with the compass until 1569, when Guidotti Mercator came up with his constant compass-bearing map with parallel lines of longitude and latitude that we use today. Thus it seems that the most obvious way to align the St. Michael monasteries was simply with the use of a compass and a Mercator map. But there are problems with that. The first and most obvious being that most of the St. Michael monasteries predate the practical use of both the compass and accurate maps by at least 400 years. But there's more. Lines of magnetism curve, and they generally point to the poles, not at the angle which St. Michael's sword is arranged. Further, there would need to be an accounting for the wandering of the Earth's magnetic poles, which move perceptively year to year. In the last 200 years, poles have moved 600 miles, and this is to say nothing of the poles flip-flopping, which they do every 100,000 years or so.
I can tell you that every powerful religious place have a special connection with the ground, with the earth. I always speak also about Jerusalem, but even the Mount Nebo in Jordan, where it's believed that the body of Moses is buried, you have this incredible special view everywhere, seeing from the Holy Land to the Dead Sea, to the Jordan Valley, to the desert. So you feel something special because the place itself is a high place with an incredible view that permit to the viewer to see also all the magnificent splendor of the land, what God created for us. And this, I think, is the sense of that place. In Jerusalem, I feel something like that. Also on the Mount of Temptation in Palestine, close to Jericho, have this special sensation that gives to you. You can see all the desert, from the Mount of Temptation, and you can see behind you the green oasis of Jericho, and you perceive the desert as a hostile land, and then the water as a gift of God. And this is the sense of that monastery, on that place. So just the possibility to view these kind of things provoke, I think, in the man the sense of sacred. This is the most important thing, looking to a sacred place connected to a land and oriented in a particular way also to the sky. It It was built there to provoke the sense of sacred to the man, to the human being.
We do know what we can see, and on occasion the beauty that attracts us is a combination of the Earth's cataclysmic convulsions and humanity's contributions. Such a place is Mount St. Michel, off France's northern coast, the third monastery along St. Michael's sword. Transcendence comes in many forms. Just looking at Mount St. Michel is a transcendent experience. Perhaps the most famous tidal island in the world, Mount St. Michel demonstrates the miracle of the Earth's rotation and the seemingly supernatural effect of the moon's orbit about the Earth. As the Earth rotates under the gravitation effect of sun and moon, the tides surround the island by up to 14 meters, or 46 feet of water, that flows from the Atlantic Ocean into the English Channel and assaults the mile-wide Normandy mudflats cutting off the island from mainland Europe. The island was originally called Mount Toumbe. Then St. Michael the Archangel appeared several times in a dream to St. Aubert, then Bishop of Avranches. The Archangel told the bishop to build a church in the Archangel's name at the top of Mount Toumbe. But the bishop ignored the dream because it was, well, just a dream. The Archangel persisted. The rocky island is too inaccessible, the bishop thought. But then one morning, Bishop Aubert woke with a hole in his forehead from the Archangel's finger. That did it. The church was built. Over the centuries, the church, monastery, and now abbey grew in size, stature, and reputation with repeated, seemingly impossible feats of construction. Today, a Romanesque abbey stands on top of the island, and on top of the abbey is a gold statue of St. Michael that was placed there in the 19th century.
So my religious congregation were the custodians of Mont Saint-Michel starting in 1867, lasting for around 30 years. The Bishop of Coutances, which is the diocese that Mont Saint-Michel is resident in, had worked with the Society of St. Edmund prior, and so he knew us and trusted us, and he asked our Superior General to send just a handful of men, 6 priests and a brother, to sort of reestablish the religious practice at Mont Saint-Michel. It had been used as a prison by the state of France, for the government of France for some decades prior. It was totally bereft of religious symbols and religious practice, and just physically it was a shambles. And so he asked us to clean it up. And as we were working and building and creating anew the tradition of practice of faith here, we wanted to place at the very top of the Abbey Church, the very summit of the mountain, a wonderful crucifix, the symbol of our Catholic faith. Nothing more Catholic than a lovely crucifix. However, the government of France said that's a little too Catholic for us. That's a little too Christian. We're not quite comfortable with that, with our Republican ideals. And so we compromised, saying, well, why don't we put a lovely gilded statue of St. Michael at the top of the Abbey Church? That way it's still Christian, but it's a little more sort of mythic and artistic for the government of France, and that was a good enough compromise for them. And so there it stays to this day.
On any given night, only about 30 people sleep on the island, not counting the hotel guests, of which I was one for a few nights. Among those few permanent inhabitants, a community of 4 monks and 6 nuns meet 4 times a day in the abbey to pray the liturgical office and celebrate Mass, at which the public is invited, thus fulfilling the building's millennial-old purpose. The island and its 50 shops, restaurants, and hotels, the tides, and the religious services in the abbey attract thousands of visitors and pilgrims every day. They come on foot, by bike, and by tram to experience the island's mystery, its beauty, nature, and to reconnect with the supernatural.
You know, Jesus says clearly in John's Gospel, he says, "You are not of this world, for I am not of this world. The Father has sent me here, and I am sending you, because I am not of this world, and you are not of this world." And in the New Testament, there's this constant Jewish clash between this world, which is the world of flesh, the world of greed, the world of sin, the world of violence, and the other world, which is the world of heaven. It's a very Platonic kind of philosophy of the other world being out there. And Jesus uses this in his teaching. And again, at Mont Saint-Michel, I couldn't help but seeing that this world was typified or symbolized by the bay of quicksand and the tide rushing in and the dangers and the perilousness of this world. And Mont Saint-Michel rising up on this rocky mountain in the middle of it all, this great Gothic church on the top of it all. I mean, it's quite stupendous. I mean, you look at it and you wonder, how is this real? Is this possible? And when you're actually up there in the church, there's a great sense of it actually being almost suspended in the air. You walk around the airy cloister, which is up there in the church itself, and it's all still vertical and aspiring upward. It lifts you right up to heaven, and you can't help but think, well, there is another country, there is another city, there is another world.
A principal character during any visit to Mont Saint-Michel is the sun, due to the clear horizon at sunrise and sunset, and the island's dramatic exposure to tides. Could it be that the St. Michael monasteries are aligned with the sun's rising or setting? Perhaps. The rum-bearing or rum line of St. Michael's sword, from one site to the next, on average, points directly at the sunset to the west-northwest on the summer solstice, or sunrise to the east-southeast on the winter solstice. Is that just a coincidence, or was it planned by the builders? And what could it mean, if anything? Is this the key fact that helps us unpack the significance of the sword? In the northern hemisphere, the summer solstice occurs near June 21st, and the winter solstice near December 21st. Is it possible that the monastery builders were able to align their particular building with the others along the solstice axis?
From ancient times, the solstices were well known for the purposes of planting and harvesting crops according to the seasons. From a fixed location, people simply tracked the sun's location along the horizon throughout the year.
But there are a number of reasons why knowing the solstice axis for a particular location doesn't give much assurance of how to line one monastery up with the others.
First, for a specific latitude and a particular day of the year, the directional bearing of the solstice axis would be the same for an infinite number of locations at the same latitude all across Europe. Further, every monastery along St. Michael's line is at a different latitude, and so the solstice bearing of a particular day would be slightly different for each, because the solstice bearing is dependent on the sun's declination and the observer's latitude.
That difference in solstice bearing along the St. Michael line is about 11 degrees. But that's also the consequence of other astronomical permutations that are difficult to calculate and track. First, the Earth's orbit around the sun is not a perfect circle, but an ellipse. Second, the Earth's shape is an oblate spheroid. It bulges at the equator and it's flatter at the poles. Third, the Earth rotates not 365 days in a solar year, but requires 365.24 days. And fourth, While unnoticeable in a human lifetime, the Earth wobbles on its axis. All of these affect the bearing of the summer and winter solstice and the alignment of buildings on Earth with a rising or setting sun.
So it is hardly possible that the builders of the St. Michael monasteries could have aligned their edifices with the others along a solstice axis. And yet the fact remains that the St. Michael line, on average, does point to the summer solstice sunset and the winter solstice sunrise. How that happened remains a mystery.
One of the things which gives an authentic ring to the belief of angels is the universal presence of angels in all human society. And wherever you go, at any point in history, at any kind of human civilization, from the most primitive to the most sophisticated, you find a belief in these intermediary beings. Sometimes they're called genii, sometimes they're called angels, sometimes they're just called spirits or gods and goddesses. But this belief in intermediary spirit beings is virtually universal amongst human beings. So when something is universal and so common, I tend to therefore believe that there's something to it.
Who then is St. Michael? What do we know about him?
St. Michael is the chief of the heavenly armies, the head angel, and he's featured in the Bible in two places, in the book of Daniel, in the Old Testament, and in the book of Revelation. And in both places, he is portrayed as a great prince, or a prince of the spiritual realm, the chief archangel, the chief of all the angels, who's fighting on God's side. He's actually mentioned in the Islamic scriptures, and of course the book of Daniel is a Jewish document, so he's there in the Jewish religion, the Islamic religion, the Christian religion, but also the idea that there is a group of angels and there's some that are over others, again, is common to many different cultures. St. Michael's historically important for within Western culture, within Western Christian culture, because he has various different roles within the mythology or the legends of Christianity. And one of the roles that he plays is not only as the chief of the heavenly armies that comes down to earth to defeat the powers of darkness, but also he is there as the judge on the last day. And in some of the medieval paintings, he'll be pictured with scales, and on the scales you find little human souls, because he's weighing up their good deeds and their bad deeds.
Shrouded in 5th century mystery is how the veneration of St. Michael started and grew among the villages of northern Italy's Susa Valley. From before the Roman Empire and since, the Susa Valley was a fertile trading route through the Alps to France and beyond. Consequently, the villages in the valley were frequently pillaged by armies and marauding thieves. Thus, prayers for protection brought apparitions of St. Michael, whom the defenseless villagers believed brought protection, and over the centuries, devotion to St. Michael the Archangel grew. In the 10th century, the Archangel appeared to a hermit known as John Vincent, who lived on a mountain overlooking the valley's eastern entrance. "Build me a church here at your hermitage on this craggy outcrop," said the Archangel.
But the hermit doubted the apparition and the message. Building a church on top of a mountain was not something a lone hermit could do. But the apparitions of St. Michael persisted, some terrifying in nature. Finally, Vincent caved and persuaded foresters and masons from the valley to stockpile building supplies at the foot of his mountain for a church to be built at the top. But how to get the tons of material up the steep mountainside? Vincent did not know. There was no road, only a narrow footpath to his hermitage. Then, one morning, Vincent woke to find the entire stockpile of materials stacked nearby, nearly at the peak of his rocky outcrop. That was the miracle he needed. There was no doubt now that St. Michael was involved. With the local bishop's permission and encouragement, the builders began construction on the church that would someday be known as Sacra di San Michele, or the Sanctuary of St. Michael, the fourth monastery along St. Michael's sword.
At first, the Sacra, as it would come to be known, had a particular purpose. Meet Tatiana Bogni, who, as a young child living nearby, longed to work at the Sacra. Today, she is Sacra's chief guide, having worked there 27 years.
Historically, the purpose of this monastery was the hospitality, and so they guested every kind of pilgrim, but in particular noble pilgrims that arrived from all of Europe. And so this was also the possibility to be in contact with other realities.
The other realities noble and lesser pilgrims experienced at the Sacra were the spiritual realities of the supernatural. That is, the realities of transcendence experienced through study, prayer, work, and worship. Thus, under Benedictine rule, the Sacra flourished for centuries and became the center of culture for the entire Susa Valley and nearby Turin.
Eventually, the Sacra fell into decline and was suppressed in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV. It remained abandoned until 1835, when King Charles Albert and Gregory XVI asked Antonio Rosmini to restore the Sacra and repopulate it. Today, the giant church and monastery towers above the Susa Valley as if to defy the laws of physics. Constructed and expanded over nearly 1,000 years, the Sacra is clearly visible to all who enter the valley from France, on foot, by beast, motor vehicle, or, as I did, by train. From Turin, a rental car took me the final stretch under mountains and up twisted switchbacks, arriving at a parking lot from which I hiked up the last kilometer to the Sacra complex, on top of Mount Perticino, which in English is unfortunately translated Mountain of the Pigs. Near the top and exhausted, I came to the ancient monk's sepulchre, ruins of the original church thought to be a reproduction of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. But where was the Sacra? Lost in the cloud. Still climbing into the cloud, there above me was the Sacra, with a misty but beautiful view of the Susa Valley. But where was, wait, there it is, the entrance. Yet once inside, guess what? More climbing.
Nowadays, the importance is because it is a huge heritage from the Middle Ages. So we have the possibility to learn what the ancient left us. In school, they used to teach that Middle Ages were dark ages. I don't think so, because I think that modern ages are the dark ages, because we have more technology, computers and so on, but we are not more able to build something like Sacra. Why? Why? Because I think society has stolen to us this knowledge, and we permitted that. There are symbols in stones, graved in the stones, and every symbol is something let for us to learn something more for our life. You have the possibility to keep in touch with yourself, with your inner part, because symbols are a part of reality or a part of truth. You have inside you the other part of truth, and when the true reality, the true truth come together, you have the light. And so you have the possibility to understand more in your life. From here you start a beautiful path, because you have to reach the church. It's not so simple reaching the church, because you have to learn something, and so the Sacra is a master, is teaching you something on your life. You have to look all around and to feel what there is inside you.
It was clear to me that the difficulty of climbing the mountain, the last hill, and the vast staircases once inside the Sacra were analogous to the trials and suffering of this life.
Yeah, it's not really simple to learn. You have never quit to learn all of the day of our life. So this is important. This is a millennial habit, and is nowadays also teaching to us something. And this is a huge heritage. And we have to keep in touch with our universe. This is the aim, we can say. If you are in touch with your universe, you are in touch with yourself, and you have the possibility to learn always. From this door, you have to look all around, as I said before, and Sacra is talking to us, but not in Italian, in English, in other languages we can learn. It's talking to us in a language that everybody have to learn and to know, the language of symbols. With the first symbol you have at the door, a triangle with a bar, and this is the symbol of the earth. So you start from the inner part of yourself, where sometimes there are some things that is not really good for you to see, and you hide those things. Those I call the heavy luggage. Everybody of us have a luggage, but we have to learn to live our heavy luggage, because more you are light, and the most you reach the light. So from darkness to light. This is the steep stair of the dead. We start from this place because this represents our material life. It's called named steep stair of the dead because the Benedictine monks use this place as a burial place, and they put the monks dead in those niches we have upon our head, like this, so everybody could see the dead monks' skeletons. And so they represent our material part of life. We have to learn and to understand that this is only the first part of our trip, the material trip. But then this trip will not stop. This trip will change. So the modality will change, and it will become the spiritual trip. Those are the bases of the Sacra. So this is the rock of the mountain where everything was built. They built the Sacra all around and atop of this mountain. And this is very important today, to feel the material things and to think also that this was a sacred place before this church, because in this valley there were the Celts. And so Celts adored and worshipped on this mountain another god, not St. Michael, but the god Lug.
At the top of the 12th century staircase of the dead, we come to the narrow zodiac portal. Carved in the 12th century by master architect and sculptor Nicolai. Facing the staircase on the portal's right column are 12 round signs of the zodiac. On the opposing side are square symbols of starry constellations. Both columns of symbols face the staircase of life and death, because we, like the stars, are part of the temporal universe. Past the portal is the last staircase that leads us up to the light of transcendence, that is, the Church, and the promise of eternal life. As significant as the spiritual symbolism is of the Sacra, the building at once reminds us of its and our temporal nature. In 1886, an earthquake collapsed this south wall of the church and brought down the ceiling of the abbey as well. It wasn't completely rebuilt until 1937, when the flying buttresses were added to ensure the stability of the abbey's south wall. The alignment of St. Michael monasteries is also known as a ley line. Ley lines are imaginary but straight lines that crisscross the Earth's surface. Some believe they are lines of Earth's subtle energy grid, and where the lines intersect, we will find elevated levels of energy or concentrations of electrical charge. Ley lines are also believed to connect prominent landmarks such as religious sites, burial mounds, and megaliths, which are said to contain a concentration of energy. In China, ley lines are known as dragon lines. In Africa, the shamans call them spirit lines. And in Australia, Aboriginals call them dream lines.
The whole idea of ley lines were developed by various theorists and archaeologists in the early 20th century. They are believed by some to be an alignment of mystical powers or spiritual forces that were known to ancient societies and who deliberately erected structures upon them. Some even believe the ley lines served as magnetic guides or electrical currents that flowed across the earth, guiding extraterrestrials and their spacecraft between sacred sites, demanding that humans worship them as gods. Of course, St. Michael was an extraterrestrial of sorts, the captain of God's heavenly army, according to Judean Christian tradition. And according to legends, St. Michael did demand that churches be built at particular locations and be dedicated to him, St. Michael. So were the builders of St. Michael monasteries able to identify these lines of earth energies in order to align their churches or abbeys? Or was God somehow involved in laying out these lines of power?
It could be. Of course, the New Age believers speculate about there being mysterious earth energies and mysterious spiritual energies, and it's a kind of spiritual power line that goes across Europe. But of course, those kind of answers actually raise more questions in your mind, because you say, well, if there's this spiritual power line that goes from Ireland to the Holy Land, why isn't there one that goes from the Holy Land out to China, for instance? Why isn't there one that goes from the Holy Land down across Africa? If that's important and God's kind of setting up a spiritual, power line system, why is there just this one?
It is doubtful that Earth's energy field helped establish the line of St. Michael monasteries. Over the decades, ley lines gained only a small following. In recent decades, most archaeologists and scientists have come to regard ley line theories as pseudo-archaeology or pseudoscience. The biggest obstacle is the lack of scientific evidence. The claim is that there is something physically different about the sites or the lines between them, or the intersection of the lines that can be measured, but no magnetic or electrical energy anomalies consistent with ley line theories have ever been detected.
Doubts arise too when archaeologists and statisticians state that given the high density of historic and prehistoric sites in Britain and other parts of Europe, finding straight lines that connect sites is trivial and ascribable to coincidence. The conclusion is that ley lines of energy or magnetic resonance just do not exist. Their existence and importance is therefore relegated to faith without evidence. But there is a way that this Earth's energy theory might make sense.
This line, I think, is the knowledge that every human being has. So this ancient knowledge and the possibility to be in touch with your universe. If you are in touch with your universe, you are part of this universe, and you can feel the very power of the earth. So there are spaces of energy, and everybody can feel this energy. But you have to be in touch with your universe and not detached as the society today wants, because there's a possibility to control us. If you are not in touch with your universe, you are in the possibility to be controlled. So this line was a line of effectively power. This is the expression of the vitality of our life and of our earth.
What is fascinating is that the monasteries are not the only religious edifices dedicated to St. Michael on or near the Sword of St. Michael line. Prior to this pilgrimage, I was surprised by the number of churches related to St. Michael that lie directly on the St. Michael line or are close to it, although they are not monasteries. Being that I would travel near them, I paid few of them a visit. Although it is a massive Catholic church and directly on the St. Michael line, France's historic Bourges Cathedral refuses to reveal any connection with St. Michael. The cathedral is rather dedicated to St. Stephen, Christianity's first martyr. Built in the 12th and 13th centuries over an earlier 6th century cathedral, Bourges is famous for its great size, open interior, and legendary 13th century stained glass. It was a thrill to visit this magnificent and sacred structure, which was fully open to visitors. I was hoping to find a connection to St. Michael when I was there, but saw none. Although I wonder if St. Michael has paid Bourges Cathedral a visit. Just south of Bourges, however, is the rock of St. Michel at Aiquilhe, a chapel that sits 279 feet high on top of an ancient volcanic chimney. Built in 969 AD, the chapel is dedicated to the Archangel Michael, appropriately patron of high places. Tradition claims the chapel was built over a prehistoric megalith tomb dedicated to the Roman god Mercury. In the 12th century, it was expanded to include the nave, side chambers, and bell tower. Exactly on the line, in the ancient city of Perugia, is the equally ancient St. Michael's Church. The circular 5th century building was likely designed with St. John's vision of the heavenly Jerusalem in mind.
La storia di questo edificio è una storia un po' controversa. Nella lingua italiana viene chiamata il Tempio di Sant'Angelo. Perché un tempio? Per la sua forma, una forma accentrata, rotonda, che nell'immaginario del diciamo, quotidiano, comune, viene collegata a un edificio di culto romano, pagano. Ma gli studi che hanno interessato questo edificio, a partire sin dall'antichità, hanno piano piano messo in evidenza che questo edificio è stata sempre una chiesa, non fu mai un tempio pagano, fu sempre una chiesa e nacque proprio con queste forme così strane, stravaganti. Allora, una cosa interessante, e adesso entriamo nel merito della interpretazione di questa struttura, è il fatto che l'organizzazione dello spazio interno di questa chiesa riproduce forse quella che è l'immagine della Gerusalemme celeste, quella che troviamo nell'Apocalisse di San Giovanni. Quindi abbiamo una simbologia, dei simboli molto molto precisi. Che cosa ci racconta l'Apocalisse di Giovanni? Ci racconta che la Gerusalemme era cinta, era racchiusa da un muro molto alto e su questo muro si aprivano 4 porte, quindi 4 ingressi principali costituiti da 12 porte, le quali 12 porte si trovavano in corrispondenza dell'asse nord-sud, est-ovest. Che cosa troviamo in questa chiesa? Troviamo nell'asse est-ovest, nord-nord-sud 3 porte che sono gli accessi, si chiamano triforia, sono gli accessi a questi ambulacri, a questi corpi che vanno a formare la croce. Poi ritroviamo anche un'altra citazione che viene fatta diciamo, dell'Apocalisse di San Giovanni e riguarda proprio gli angeli, perché l'Apocalisse di San Giovanni ci dice che in corrispondenza delle 12 aperture della Gerusalemme si trovavano in alto i 12 angeli e noi abbiamo esattamente in alto in questo edificio 12 finestre che si aprono esattamente in corrispondenza in gruppi di 3 di questi corpi periferici che formano la croce. Quindi abbiamo una riproduzione in questa architettura della descrizione della Gerusalemme celeste di San Giovanni.
The St. Michael Church in Perugia also reinforces the legendary role of St. Michael's protection throughout church history in Europe.
Ma nel Nuovo Testamento, diciamo in età cristiana, la figura di Michele viene ad assumere un ruolo principale e viene ad assumere anche dei significati dal punto di vista del culto diversi. Innanzitutto, il suo valore più antico, che è quello di psicopompo, cioè colui che accompagna le anime dei morti. Quindi è un medium tra Dio e la terra, fra la terra e il cielo. Questo è il significato, diciamo, più antico, più tradizionale. Poi abbiamo un altro significato, un altro ruolo, diciamo, del culto di San Michele, che si sviluppa soprattutto in primo luogo, in area bizantina, in Frigia, nell'Asia Minore. E in questo, diciamo, ambito viene enfatizzato il ruolo diciamo, legato alla sua funzione salvifica, di medico in un certo senso, attraverso, e questo è l'elemento importante, l'uso dell'acqua. E infatti molti santuari dedicati a San Michele si trovano in corrispondenza di acque sorgive, perché l'acqua doveva essere di fonte, sorgiva, non l'acqua ferma. E poi un altro significato del culto di San Michele è stato quello che che poi si diffuse in tutta l'Europa medievale, alto medievale, di protettore degli eserciti e degli stati.
Just to the west of Perugia and the Line is a truly unique St. Michael artifact.
In the 10th century, Galgano Guidotti, a young knight with a violent and hedonistic reputation, experienced an apparition of St. Michael. The Archangel told Galgano that unless he changed his irresponsible ways, hell's gates would open wide to welcome him. Galgano responded that he could no more change his ways than his sword could be plunged into solid rock. Taking up the challenge, St. Michael unsheathed Galgano's sword and thrust it up to the hilt in a nearby boulder. Galgano was so shocked by this, he gave up his ways and became a religious hermit.
100 years later, the Cistercian monks built the St. Galgano Abbey, today roofless, that stands near the Monte Chapel, where Galgano's sword is still stuck into the stone. Some believe St. Galgano inspired the story of Sir Galganus, also known as Sir Gawain, of the Arthurian Excalibur legend and his fellow knights of the Round Table. Have you ever noticed how angels are everywhere? We find them on mantles, jewelry, movie posters, circulars, and in graveyards. Why is that? Are they objects of beauty? Do we fear their hauntings? Do we hope they will protect us? Have you ever seen an angel? Some say when we die, angels will ferry us away to the afterlife. Clearly, if angels exist, they come from someplace beyond this world. Perhaps there is no place that better illustrates the ubiquitous imagery of angels than in Rome. Although Rome is not on St. Michael's line, it is close. In Rome, near the Vatican, stands the Bridge of Sant'Angelo, or Angel Bridge. Completed in 154 AD by Emperor Hadrian, it has been expanded, rebuilt, and reinforced several times over the centuries. Today, 10 sculptures of angels representing Christ's Passion stand guard over the pedestrian walkway. At the north end is the castle of Sant'Angelo, built also by Emperor Hadrian as his mausoleum. Today it is a museum, topped with a statue of St. Michael to honor how the Archangel appeared there in 590 AD to end a plague.
There's also the idea that we have our guardian angels. We all have an angel that oversees us. Perhaps, and I'm speculating here, of course, there's no biblical evidence for this, perhaps when we get to the other side, our angel, our guardian angel, will be our advocate and be on our side, if you like, if we're people of faith. And maybe there is a negative angel who's on the other side saying, you know, what about these things that they've done? One on each shoulder, that's right. And some of the near-death experiences that people have had, they return to this life, of course, and they recount having seen their guardian angel, and having seen angels who've tried to usher them into heaven and talk to them and encourage them to make the right choices. Now again, there's lots of debate about the authenticity of near-death experiences, but these are little scraps of human experience, different scraps of anecdotal evidence, if you like. Of course, the cynics would say, you already believed it, that's why you found that evidence. And I'd say, yeah, probably that's true, but you already disbelieved it, that's why you discount the evidence. It all adds up.
In my quest to visit the 7 monasteries of St. Michael's Sword, I left behind the Sacra, as the locals call it in the Piedmont region of the Italian Alps. My GPS took me east to the Apennines, the mountain range that runs down the center of Italy's boot. After the stop in Perugia and my visit to the 5th century St. Michael Church, I drove south along the Adriatic Sea coast. There were long rolling hills and kilometer-long bridges and tunnels. I was headed for the 5th monastery in the line of St. Michael, known as the Sanctuary of Mount Sant'Angelo. It was on the spur that sticks out of Italy's east coast, just above the boot's heel, at the north end of the Perugia region. The spur is the Galgano promontory, or mountain, that juts out into the Adriatic. Looking at a map, one might expect a difference in geological features when approaching the spur, and that is indeed what I ran into. The land is flat farmland all around, when suddenly the Galgano mountain dominates the horizon. Before long, the straight road turned into switchbacks as the elevation rose 1,000 meters. Finally, I came to the mountain town of Mount Sant'Angelo, on top of a ridge or massif over the Carbonara Valley. My room at the monastery's guest house was on the edge of the Galgano Massif. At night, I could hear dozens of cowbells of cattle hundreds of feet below, grazing on the terraced mountainside. The geology and the plethora of cows explain the story about how this monastery and this town came to be and got their names. Galgano comes from the name of a 5th century farmer named Garganus, who was looking for a stray bull that had climbed near the top of the massif where there was a cave. Irritated that the bull would not come down when called, and not wanting to climb the steep mountainside, Garganus shot an arrow up at the bull, but the arrow miraculously turned about in mid-flight, flew back down the mountainside, and hit Garganus in the foot. This frightened the farmer, who saw this as some sort of mystical portent. He told his bishop, Lawrence of Siponto, a town on the coast 12 kilometers away. The bishop declared a fast for 3 days, after which St. Michael appeared to the bishop and declared that the cave where the bull was grazing was sacred to him, the Archangel, and that a church should be built there. If the bishop did that, St. Michael promised to protect the town of Serponto from invading hordes of pagans. Thus the shrine of Mount Sant'Angelo was founded and built onto the front of the cave. Over the decades, thanks to visiting pilgrims, the shrine became the foundation of the town of Mount Sant'Angelo, which grew up around the shrine. In 663 AD, the region was invaded by pagan Neapolitans. As the Archangel had promised, on the eve of the battle, St. Michael appeared with a flaming sword atop Mount Galgano, and the locals were victorious over the invading army. In celebration of the victory, a feast was proclaimed, honoring the Archangel, and over the coming decades, the feast spread throughout Western Christendom. The feast today is called Michaelmas. The geology of this site fascinated me. Having never lived near mountains or similar geological features, I always thought of caves as being underground, not at the top of a mountain. When I arrived at the guest house, the entrance and registration desk were on ground level, but it was called the 6th floor, and there were no additional floors above it. My room was on 1 floor down, on the 5th floor. There was a balcony just outside my room. When I walked out onto it, there was nothing above me, yet a vista of the Carbonara Valley lay before me. To my right was the sanctuary building that had been built over the cave entrance. But where was the church? I could not tell. The main visitor entrance to the church was located nearby, on the same level as the 6th floor entrance to the guest house. Every other monastery I had visited, when you entered the main building or site, there were steps to climb up and up and up to the church proper. But here, surprisingly, the steps took me down and down and down to the man-made entrance to the grotto that centuries earlier was a natural cave on the side of the massif. Here, in the repurposed cave, was the nave and sanctuary where Mass was celebrated throughout the day. This shrine at Mount Sant'Angelo has since become a popular pilgrimage site on the way to Jerusalem, and even more so when, in the 17th century, St. Michael was credited with miraculously delivering the region from a plague. Again, he had appeared to the Saponto bishop with this message:
all of the town's inhabitants should go to the shrine, take a rock they find there, and on that rock carve a cross and the name Michael, meaning who is like God.
It would become a symbolic reminder that they should build their life on God alone. Over the centuries, the shrine has been visited by many popes and saints, including Thomas Aquinas, Francis of Assisi, and Padre Pio, whose shrine is nearby. Today, it is estimated that over 2 million pilgrims come to the sanctuary of Mount Sant'Angelo the Archangel each year for prayer and healing, as they seek to reconnect with the supernatural. In spite of the difficulty of accessing the St. Michael monasteries, first glance at a map reinforces the idea that the monasteries could well have been way stations for pilgrims on their way to the Holy Land. They are nearly equal distance apart and in a straight line that points directly to Israel. Could it be that they are all part of an elaborate plan by monks, friars, and clerics to facilitate journeys by land and sea to the Holy Land? The historical records, however, of why and where each monastery was built contain no evidence that any of the locations were conceived simply as a hostel for Holy Land travelers, although most had guest houses. Every monastery expected pilgrims to visit, but there were many reasons for pilgrims to come other than finding their way to Jerusalem. Neither was the construction of the monasteries systematic over time. They were conceived first as small places for men to separate themselves from the world for fasting, prayer, and penance. Little by little, locals would come, and as the reputation of the monks grew for sanctity and help, the original small chapels were expanded to churches and then to grand abbeys. In some cases, natural catastrophes collapsed walls, and only after 100 years and the discoveries of new construction technologies were the buildings rebuilt, larger and better. Regardless of the motivation for building the monasteries, they did indeed become way stations for many pilgrims going to the Holy Land. But monasteries on their own also served as places for worship, prayer, and contemplation. They became strongholds, refuges, hermitages, centers of industry, healing, agriculture, education, and the development of Western civilization.
St. Michael stands for us today, as he has for many ages, as a kind of agent between heaven and earth, a focus, if you like, of our own participation in the battle against evil. And so he stands as a powerful symbol. I mean, he stands there garbed in his armor, which shows that he is a warrior. He's shown with the spear, pinning down the dragon, which is the symbol of evil and the earth powers and the lust within us. And so he therefore stands as a kind of symbol and focus of the battle that we're all engaged in. So at the end of Mass, for instance, as a Catholic priest, at the end of Mass, I lead my people in saying the St. Michael prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. So we actually pray to St. Michael as a focus of our participation with him in this great battle of evil.
Getting there is half the fun, they say, and some have written it's not about the destination, it's the journey. It's a paradox, I suppose, that without a destination, there can be no journey, and that all journeys require a destination, unless meandering aimlessly has an address. So what is it? The destination that gives one drive and determination, or the journey that makes the destination possible? This pilgrimage to the 7 monasteries of St. Michael's Sword was definitely more about the journey than the destination. On average, I spent less than 7 days total exploring those 7 destinations, and more than 14 days traveling from one to the next. A good example of such a journey was getting from Mount Sant'Angelo on Galgano mountain in Italy to the monastery of Taxiarchis, Michele, Panormitis on the island of Simi in Greece. From Mount Sant'Angelo, I drove my rental back to Rome, where I took a day to run around and photograph a few sites. Exhausting myself in the 100+ degree heat, I rose early and caught a plane to Athens, Greece. And after a 5-hour layover, I took another flight to Rhodes. Once in Rhodes, a taxi took me to the old city, a walled-in medieval town where no cars are allowed. So my driver dropped me off at the port gate, and I walked to my room for the night. The old city took over 200 years to build by knights to protect Christians during the Crusades, but in 1522 the city was besieged by Muslim Ottoman Turks. 2,000 Christians died defending the city, but the Muslims gave up 50,000 lives to take it, giving the remaining 5,000 Christians safe passage to leave. Today, 6,000 people live in the city, which is a tourist destination with shops, cafes, restaurants, museums, and a very active nightlife. After a great meal and a night's sleep, I walked out of the city with my 70 pounds of luggage on my back, in my travel vest, and in a roller bag. I walked across the street to the ferry ticket booth. I had chosen my room in the old city so I could quickly walk to the ferry the next morning. From my room to the ferry ticket booth took me no more than 10 minutes. Good planning, I thought. Not so fast. When the agent gave me my ticket, which I had reserved weeks earlier, she told me the ferry I was to take was in the next port, not the one I was at. My heart sank. She pointed to the east. I looked and saw a big boat. She said that was it. It was a long walk, and the sidewalks in this part of the world are made of stones on end that evidently last centuries, but abuse the small wheels on roller suitcases. I discovered later the stones destroyed the bearings on my roller suitcase, forcing me to drag it along the rest of the trip. When I got to the dock, the guard asked to see my ticket. I showed it to him. Much to my disappointment, he shook his head and said, "Not here, it's over there." And he pointed further east. But this time, It was so far away and around a corner, I could not see the boat. He insisted I walk east along the water. There were no taxis this time of day. They had all gone to bed after a late night of fairs leaving the old city. Altogether, it was a little over a mile. With my load, it took just under an hour. Luckily, the boat did not leave until I was aboard. The large car ferry left the Rhodes port on time and sailed for 90 minutes to the island of Simi. It wasn't until I prepared to edit this video that I discovered my flight from Athens to Rhodes had flown over the island when I captured this shot. My destination was the monastery at Panormitis, on the south side of the island, visible out my airplane window. You will also notice, however, that the island is extremely mountainous, and my ferry ticket was taking me to the opposite north side of the island. I would have to rent a car or scooter and navigate mountain switchbacks. Near the ferry dock was Garlos car and motorbike rentals. I highly recommend them, good rates and good service. I rented a small car and was off, but soon discovered that Google Maps cannot be trusted on this island. I ended up in a goat pasture. I backed down the road, asked for directions, and finally got on the main road, although the main road at places is only wide enough for one small car and one motor scooter. If you misjudge your path, you'll be in the harbor, as this video clearly shows. The drive to Panormitis on the south side of the island took about 45 minutes, since I have a phobia of mountain switchbacks with no guardrails. But I made it to the monastery, the only one of the 7 that is Greek Orthodox, not Catholic. It is also the only monastery of the 7 that is not at the top of a mountain, although ironically, to get there, I had to traverse mountain switchbacks like every other place, and like many of the others, it is surrounded by water. It is generally believed that the monastery was built around 450 AD on the site of a pagan temple to Apollo.
There, the foundation of the church dedicated to St. Michael are just on top of this ancient temple. So it is as if St. Michael wanted to retrieve these sites on behalf of God to the only true religion from these demons that were actually had taken over it. And when we regard Apollo St. Michael's line or axis, we actually can see that this battle is ongoing. Because we still have this juxtaposition of St. Michael and Apollo on both sides.
Today, the monastery is headed by Abbot Anthony, seen here. He's the one on the right. Being Greek, the monastery was small and without seating, but rich in icons which covered every square foot of the walls. To the Orthodox faithful, icons are not just symbolic paintings of the heavenly personage, but windows through which mystical and transcendent light of the saint's character passes to us and helps us communicate with God. The monastery is famed for its 6-foot-tall, silver-clad icon of St. Michael. There are representations of this icon in practically every shop on the island. Here's Garos writing up my rental agreement, and next to me is a copy of the miraculous icon of St. Michael. The icon is considered miraculous because during construction of the monastery, it was removed several times for safekeeping, but overnight it would appear again in the same place it had been. It is said that there are over 300 private monasteries or shrines dedicated to St. Michael on Simi Island, and virtually they are all on the line of St. Michael. The official name of the monastery is Taxiarchis Michele Panormitis. Taxiarchis means commander of the bodiless hosts of angels. Michele stands in for Michael, of course, and Panormitis is the name of the village where the monastery is located. There is also a cult of St. Michael among Greek seamen who have prayed to the Archangel for protection, since he is the patron saint of seamen and fishermen. There is also a local tradition that if you have made a promise to St. Michael, you must fulfill it, or else the boat you want to use to leave the island will be prevented from leaving the dock, so islanders and visitors are held accountable. This has become such a regular occurrence that the captain of the boat will announce over the PA to the passengers that someone on the boat has forgotten to fulfill a promise to the taxiarch. Once this promise is fulfilled, then and only then do the boat's engines work.
Many places of worship were established on the island of Simi, and with time the heresy gave place to orthodoxy, but these places remained dedicated to St. Michael. So for now we've got 9 monasteries dedicated to St. Michael on the island, without churches also dedicated to St. Michael. So he is actually a very important persona over the island. And the nine monasteries also equal to 9 sections of angelic hierarchy. So we've got at the bottom angels and archangels, principalities, powers, that's right, and so on. So we've got seraphim to be the closest to actually God. So these 9 sections are equal to 9 monasteries on the island. The whole island is dedicated, it's like opposition to the island of Rhodes, which is actually dedicated to the solar deity, pagan gods. So the whole island is actually, under the power of Christianity when it comes to Simi.
Now there's an obvious issue with all of the St. Michael monastery locations. They're isolated, especially the locations on small islands like Simi, Skellig Michael, St. Michael's Mount, and Mount St. Michel. The seclusion doesn't reinforce their unity, but rather their independence from one another. So how could they be aligned or related? Was there some enigmatic, even invisible knowledge lost to history, but secretly shared between religious monks and friars, hidden in their insulated castles, unknown to the outside world? Could such secretive knowledge have aided the alignment of the monasteries? If so, of what nature could it possibly be? In archaeological circles, there's an elephant in the room that isn't talked about. It's something so astonishing we can't quite grasp what it might mean. Something obvious but still mysterious, like the alignment of St. Michael monasteries. It's quantum theory, which inform us that there is a realm we cannot see, where information travels faster than the speed of light, where matter at opposite ends of the universe are physically connected through dimensions we cannot sense, where the simple presence of human consciousness in the form of human observation can trigger a physical reality that cannot be otherwise perceived. Yes, there is scientific evidence that there is an unseen nature, a sacramental reality, a transcendent reality, which begs us to be reconnected to it. Today, physicists call it quantum mechanics, but in ancient times it may have gone by another name, a transcendent name, a secret name, or secret knowledge that told religious men how and where to build their temples and monasteries. The problem with such secret knowledge, especially when dealing with history and the concrete record of artifacts, is this. There is no code of Hammurabi describing it, nor is there a Rosetta Stone that reveals how to decode it. There's only the placement of the straight-line monasteries to intrigue the human mind. But that does not mean the secret doesn't exist. It only means it hasn't yet been discovered. Before I left on my trip to reconnoiter the monasteries along the line of St. Michael, I wrote each to gain permission to record video and inquire about local historians or archaeologists to interview. The response from Stella Monastery in Haifa, Israel, was at first silence. After repeated requests, I received the following reply.
In our monastery, there are no references or statues or anything else that could be related to San Michel. Whoever drew the lines of connection between the various sanctuaries dedicated to him imprudently put our monastery as an endpoint without any reason. So this news you want to know is fake. Our community thinks this way.
That might have put an end to my decision to visit the place, but it didn't. If for no other reason that Father Dwight Longnecker had already visited the site, as had many others before us, and multiple investigators declared Stella Maris was the tip of St. Michael's sword. What could this mean? Was there some hidden meaning? I went to investigate. The current Stella Maris Monastery was built relatively recently in 1836. The monastery is dedicated to Our Lady of Mount Carmel as the Star of the Sea, which is what Stella Maris means in Latin. Off and on since the 12th century, religious hermits lived in the caves on Mount Carmel in imitation of Elijah the prophet. In fact, the current church's altar is built over the supposed cave where Elijah dwelt, and visitors can walk into it where an altar is installed with a statue of Elijah above it. Notice that Elijah wields a sword, as he does at the Muhraqua Carmelite Monastery a few miles to the southeast, also on Mount Carmel, that I visited later that day. This time, Elijah is found on a high pedestal with pilgrims milling about, having disembarked from a host of tour buses. The Muhraqua site is famous. It is here on this Mount Carmel cliff that Elijah baited the 450 prophets of the Baal to a contest, their pagan god Baal against Elijah's Jehovah God. Scattered around the monastery, here on a high Mount Carmel plateau, and seen in this video along a path to the edge of the cliff, are large, squarish stones, some stacked on top of one another. They are thought by some to be the ruins of the hundreds of Baal altars built here at the time of Elijah some 3,000 years ago. In front of the Israelites, who had turned to Baal worship, Elijah incited the Baal prophets to sacrifice a bull on a stone altar, but not light it, but to pray to Baal to send fire and consume the sacrifice. The pagan prophets got busy. They did what Elijah asked, but nothing happened. So they shouted to Baal as if to wake him up. They slashed themselves with swords and spears until their blood flowed. Still nothing. Elijah mocked them.
Aha! Baal must be sleeping or traveling.
Their frantic yelling and bloodletting was totally ignored. This went on all day as Elijah continued to make fun of them in front of the crowd of Israelites. Just before the evening sacrifice, Elijah repaired the stone altar to Jehovah that had fallen to disrepair. He put wood upon it, dug a trench around it, and put the parts of a sacrificed bull upon it. Then he ordered 12 jars of water to be poured over the whole affair, so that the trench was filled with water. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah backed away from the altar and prayed,
"Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again."
It was then that thunder and the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried,
"The Lord is God! The Lord is God!"
Elijah then ordered the people to seize the 450 prophets of Baal, not letting any of them escape, and take them down the mountain to the Kishon Valley and the river that flowed into the sea. There, Elijah slaughtered the 450 prophets with a sword. Muhraqua, the name of the monastery on the site where the altars were built, means the Great Fire. In remembering this story, I could not help but compare Elijah's sword that did battle against the evil of Baal and the many stories of St. Michael as heaven's chief warrior, who also wields a sword against evil. In Ireland, the legend goes, St. Michael showed up with a host of angels to help St. Patrick rid Ireland of demons. And on Galgano mountain, St. Michael does the same to help the locals defeat invading Greeks. Could it be that God sent St. Michael to Mount Carmel as an uncredited angel to assist Elijah in defeating and slaughtering the Baal prophets? I think it's possible. Then there is the sword that is always present in depictions of St. Michael, which is also in the hand of Elijah and on the Carmelite coat of arms. While these are indirect or implicit correlations between Mount Carmel and St. Michael, there are two explicit ones. The first is an ancient Ukrainian legend that when Elijah encountered the Baal prophets, it was St. Michael that brought the thunder to the battle. The second is that the Carmelite monasteries overlook Tel Megiddo, or Armageddon ruins, where St. John's Revelation suggests that St. Michael will battle Satan at the end of time. In fact, the Armageddon site is directly in line with the sword of St. Michael, just past Stella and Muhraqua, as if Our Lady, Star of the Sea, and Elijah were pointing the way. In the end, I think we should discount Stella and Muhraqua monasteries as the tip of St. Michael's sword. What makes more sense to me is that Michael's sword has been drawn from its sheath and readied for the battle, a battle that will end all battles and all wars, the Battle of Armageddon. What do you make of the St. Michael Monastery alignment? I've met skeptics who thought the alignment was meaningless, ascribing it to something called epiphania, which is the unmotivated perception of connections without objective correlations. So is the alignment of the St. Michael monasteries simply a coincidence, or is it something more?
I know that there are those who will simply dismiss it as mere coincidence or epiphania, seeing connections between things that aren't really there. But the fact that these monasteries all dedicated in some fashion to Michael the Archangel, are inexplicably in a straight geographical line. Yes, there are attempts to explain this phenomenon with scientific theories and secular arguments, but they don't hold up very well under scrutiny. The builders of these monastic structures had no access to the science or the technology by which the monasteries could be deliberately placed in a straight line across thousands of miles. This is certainly not, it's certainly not unreasonable to posit a supernatural explanation, frankly, a kind of a miracle by which God shows himself in human endeavors. However, even if at some point it could be proven that there is a natural explanation why these monasteries are in a straight line stretching all the way from Ireland to the Middle East, that doesn't necessarily mean that God isn't involved. After all, when human beings follow the order of the material world, the alignment of the stars or the solar solstices, human beings are simply applying the God-given designs of the universe to human ingenuity, especially when human beings offer worship to the God who created the universe. In any case, for skeptics simply to claim that St. Michael's sword is merely a coincidence, or people seeing connections between things that aren't really there, they're only random or accidental, this is hardly a very satisfying explanation that it's just coincidence. The straight line of these structures exhibits order and thus intention. And so the human intellect naturally looks for an explanation for such order. And when the human explanations fail, it's only fitting to credit the supernatural.
These are the ruins of Tel Megiddo, an ancient village in the shadow of Mount Carmel and within eyesight of Muhraqua. In Greek, Tel Megiddo is Armageddon, the place where armies gather. In Christian prophecy, Tel Megiddo is the location of the last battle at the end of time. Even in Islam, Armageddon is mentioned in Hadith as the Great Battle. Tel Megiddo lies next to the Jezreel Valley, or the Valley of Jehoshaphat. Many battles were fought here in an effort to control trade between Egypt, Syria, and Mesopotamia. In such battles, the cities or forts were often destroyed. Later, new cities were built on top of the ruins, creating layers of history back thousands of years. That Tel Megiddo is at the tip of the sword of St. Michael may be significant.
Of course, the old medieval legend was that at the end times and the final battle, the angels would descend to the mountaintops to come to fight in the final battle against evil. And if Tel Megiddo, Armageddon, is where that takes place, maybe those people would speculate that the angels are going to pop down into the 7 different monasteries and use it as a kind of psychic highway to get themselves to Armageddon. In which case, if they can do that, why not just go to Armageddon to start with?
There are 100 references in the Christian Bible to Tel Megiddo, Armageddon, or the great battle at the end of time. The prophet Joel wrote,
I will gather the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there.
In John's Apocalypse,
they are demonic spirits that perform signs, and they go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them for the battle on the great day of God Almighty at the place called Armageddon.
Joel continues,
Let the nations stir themselves up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations, for their evil is great. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision.
Matthew quotes Jesus on the subject.
For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now and never will be.
And in Daniel,
At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as there has never been before. But your people will be delivered, everyone whose name is written in the book of life.
could that be it? Could the alignment not be the consequence of star alignments, Earth energy fields, magnetic resonance, the solstice alignment, or secret knowledge? Could the legends about St. Michael be true? Could St. Michael have actually appeared to hermits, monks, friars, and bishops, and asked them to build monasteries in specific locations in order to create an undeniable and extraordinary straight line that human civilizations in the future could not ignore? And could St. Michael have been at Elijah's side when the prophet confronted the 450 prophets of the Baal? Could the line of St. Michael have the simple purpose of presenting massive temporal evidence that something transcendent is going on? Does the line point to something sacred? Is the line actually a massive sacrament that purposely points to the supernatural? Are the monasteries and their alignment an undeniable physical reality that remind us that the supernatural is real? Are they, like the monks and friars that built them, the connection between heaven and earth? When I started this pilgrimage, I was in doubt if I should have spent the months of effort and resources to take it on. And then on my first day in Ireland, just after losing my luggage, it was as if an angel came to my rescue. He was my cross-country driver, Sean Michael Swords. His name was clearly a transcendent moment that the trip I had begun was supposed to be. And then, to cap things off, as I was photographing the landscape between Stella Monastery and the Mediterranean Sea, a touring American family asked me to take their picture. I did. This is the picture I took of the Bahu family. Realizing we were both from America, they asked what I was doing there.
I told them briefly about the alignment of the monasteries and how it was called the Sword of St. Michael. I even mentioned my doubts and my meeting with Sean Michael Swords, my taxi driver, back in Ireland, and how that encounter has sustained me for the journey that I was ending on that very day. The family stirred and looked at one another, and I think the oldest son even chuckled. I asked them what was wrong. The father, whose name was Ramiz, turned to me smiling and said, "I think you were supposed to be on this trip too." Then he said,
"Our patriarch, my father, his name is Michael. He was born in Jaffa, and we immigrated to the United States in 1980. So I have 4 older brothers, and 3 of them named Michael, and I named my son Michael. So Michael is everywhere in our family. So you can call us the Michael family, and that would work because that's our patriarch."
I know our culture is hungry and starved for mystery and for meaning, and I think things like this can very often spark curiosity in people's minds and a sense of wonder first of all at these fantastic monasteries and churches, built on in these inaccessible places. I visited Mont Saint-Michel again just last week, and walking across the flats to go and see it, you look up and it's just an absolute wonder. The latest part of the architecture on the backside is actually called the Marvel, or the Wonder. And you can't help but see it and just be absolutely amazed and struck with wonder at this amazing site. And then when you realize that it's on this line with 6 other monasteries built in a similar way in similar places, it must fill anyone's heart and mind with wonder and awe and ask some serious questions. I'm struck how much this is a metaphor for the spiritual journey. There we are in our flat, sort of materialistic, blinded kind of existence, walking across this bay, which is actually quite dangerous and treacherous because it's full of quicksand, and the tide comes when it comes in at, they say, at the speed of a galloping horse. You can be swept away by quicksand and swept away by the tide. I'm reminded of the story in the Gospel that the foolish man built his house upon the sand, but the wise man built his house upon the rock. This is a fantastic image of that whole story, that our earthly pilgrimage across the quicksands and the shifting sands and the tides is perilous, and it's dangerous, and it's unpredictable, and we're headed for this celestial city which is built on the rock, and you can't help but think of heaven when you go there. When I was there last week, the morning sun was shining on that golden limestone, and it was like, well, it was like getting a little picture of heaven floating above earth. The symbolism of it and the imagery of it, therefore, is so powerful. And I said to my friend that I was with, look at all these hundreds of people streaming out to visit this monastery. The vast majority of them would have been secular materialists, tourists who were there to buy a few trinkets and have lunch and visit this historic site. But I said, deep down, they know that they are searching for something greater and something more marvelous and more wonderful. They too are on their own trek to heaven, even if they're unconscious of that.
What was it that caused men of centuries past to leave their villages and cleave precariously to the side of mountains and other worldly, almost inaccessible sites where they built churches, monasteries, sanctuaries, and abbeys that reached to the heavens? Do these magical structures acknowledge an innate but invisible spirit within us? Or is it that we're constantly trying to transcend our temporal nature? Could it be that these memorials are a confession that we are not just a glob of cells, but that we possess something that seeks to confirm our transcendent nature and be united with the soul of the universe? Are these landmarks physical evidence that reality is not only what we see, but what we can also imagine? Is it possible that these creations point to an unseen, ubiquitous reality? Are we surrounded by mystery? Are we called to a greater form of being? Whatever it is, it's everywhere, and it humbles. What is transcendence? Is it simply an awareness of the infinite, or a desire to experience the miraculous? Or is it a divine calling to reconnect with the supernatural?